Hey there guys, welcome back to NGIF. Today is a special feature episode where I'm going to be talking about the MoP Pandaria Talent Trees and their possible effects in PvP. So, the reason I want to talk about this today is because there's a lot of controversy over this topic. Constantly I hear people saying how much the new talent system is going to ruin PvP, ruin the game, kill WoW, and there's so many reasons that that's not true, and I just have to talk about it. I wanted to make this a special episode because I have way too much to say to fit into a regular NGIF episode. So, yeah, that's why we're doing this, and I'm so sick of hearing it. I'm so sick of hearing people who are really casual, really underskilled players say it, and also people on the other end of the spectrum that play this game really well and know what they're talking about, and they're saying the same thing, and it bugs me, and I just want to explain myself. So first of all, I'm going to be breaking this down into 3 different sections. First off, we have the problem, which is that players have too many cooldowns and it causes a continuous rotation of abilities in Arena or other forms of PvP. Secondly, we have the desire, which is what players want out of PvP, how players want the PvP experience to feel. And thirdly, we're going to talk about the MoP Pandaria Talent Trees and how they're going to effectively change the way PvP acts and how they're going to feed those desires that the players want. So let's get started with the problem. First of all, a lot of people like to say that the game is imbalanced right now, which actually, if you look back through the expansions and you look at the class system right now, the game is more balanced than it has ever been before in PvP. Sure, there are slight imbalances, like right now warriors are pretty low, and maybe your enhancement shaman isn't rated 2900, but that doesn't mean that the game is imbalanced. The game is the most balanced it's ever been right now. Effectively, you can bring in any spec into an arena match and still be semi-competitive. You can reach 1750 at least with any class or spec right now. You could be a boomkin, an enhancement shaman, an Ellie shaman, a blood death knight, a prot warrior, a prot paladin, it doesn't matter. If you have the skill, you can push any spec right now to at least 1750. And that's the most the game has ever been balanced before. If you look back to the Burning Crusade, you had rogues that were just dominating every arena. It was instant 2200. I mean, that's not balanced. Sure, people might have liked PvP more back then because of the way that it played and the way that it felt, but that doesn't mean that it was balanced. Right now, the game is as balanced as it's ever been. What I think is the problem is the total number of abilities and cooldowns that players have. When you go into an arena match, it doesn't matter what rating you're at. If you're a 2500 player or if you're somebody who's in blues and is doing it for fun and you're rated 950, it doesn't matter. When you get into an arena match, players simply have too many cooldowns. Let's look at threes, for example. You have, let's say, a Disc Priest Lock Mage team versus, I don't know, TSG, whatever, Warrior DK Pally. One of those teams is going to win. It's probably going to be the MLS. Or, not MLS, I said Priest, but, so whatever. You have a Priest, Lock, and a Mage. The Priest is going to be able to roll cooldowns all day long. Now, sure, eventually somebody's going to line up CC and you're going to be able to land a kill, and that's when skill starts to take into effect and class balance starts to take its effect. But ultimately, the game's I find that a lot of players feel that certain classes and specs are overpowered, when it's not that they're overpowered, more so than it is that because that class has a certain set of utility and abilities, when it is playing the class of the character that, thinks that they're overpowered, they collide. Hunters are a hard counter to mages, and warlocks are a hard counter to warriors, and you have these different hard counters, which makes sense. I mean, you're going to find that in any level of balance. Somebody's going to beat somebody in certain instances. But I just think that there's an overuse of player cooldowns. Like, when you're training somebody, let's say in 1v1 a duel, let's say that you're a Frost Mage versus a Disc Priest. That Disc Priest, yeah, he's killable. If you're a good Frost Mage, you're going to kill him. But it still is going to feel like he's overpowered. He's still going to rotate cooldown after cooldown after cooldown, and shield after shield after shield, and it just feels like it takes way too much to get through all of that. And I feel that that's the big problem that players are experiencing in Arena and Rated Battlegrounds right now, is that players simply have too many abilities. That's it. That's why it feels imbalanced, because it feels like You know, if you're playing a specific class, like if I'm playing my Warlock, I feel like rogues are overpowered. They're not necessarily. I mean, yeah, they're definitely one of the more powerful classes, but that doesn't make them overpowered necessarily, because there's plenty of classes that are going to beat a rogue. But I feel like they're overpowered because I feel like every time I use an ability, it just gets negated by some other ability that the rogue has. And it feels like this continuous chain of lameness. It just feels lame. I think that's the big issue. People, when they get into an arena match, they want excitement. They want, you know, a lot of oomph. They want just crazy things to happen. You want that arena match when you get in there and you go, oh my god, you know, he used this, and oh my god, I can't believe that happened. And I don't feel like that happens as much anymore. I feel like nowadays it's just like, oh, he popped this, I popped this. He popped this, I popped this. He popped this, I popped this. And it's just this continuous chain of counters. That's all it is. It's a counter to everything. He used this, I use that, he used that, I use that. And it just goes on forever until somebody CCs correctly enough and lands a kill. And that's just not how players want it to feel. Which brings me to my next point, which is the desire. I think that players want PvP to feel exciting like it did in Burning Crusade or even Wrath of the Lich King. But they want it to be balanced at the same time. I think that's the issue. I think in Cataclysm PvP, we have seen the greatest balance ever, but with large numbers and huge health pools and crazy amounts of resilience. I mean, we're over 50% damage reduction now. So the way that scales just with PvE, not that really matters, but just the way that it looks and feels in the game, I think in a subconscious level is really lame, and people just don't like it. I think people want that crazy burst. Can you survive that crazy burst, and can you know, switch from the defense to the offensive quickly using the correct abilities and the correct setup? Because that's what makes for an exciting arena match. Whereas right now, you just go in, and like I said, you're just rotating cooldowns, and it's really boring, essentially. And I feel that players want the excitement from some previous expansions where players have a little bit less abilities, but if you use those abilities correctly in the correct order, you're going to see a much more exciting arena match. But they also want the balance that we see in Cataclysm. Now, that brings me to the big third point, which is the Miss of Pandaria Talent Trees. I think that these are going to solve all of our issues in PvP for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, if people want to complain about the high resilience numbers, the crazy damage reduction through resilience, the high health pools, that's all going to be taken care of with item squish anyway, so I'm just going to ignore that factor because it has way more to do with the item squish issue, and that's not really what I'm here to talk about. I want to talk about the talent trees specifically. So what you have now is a series of classes where all of our talents that are like, this buffs this by 10% damage, or this makes this act this way, that's all getting built into our class spec as a whole. So if I'm a Warlock and I spec Affliction right now, I have all these little talents that I'm going to pick from that are going to buff this and change this and affect this. Whereas in Miss Pandaria, those are all going to be pushed right into my spec. Oh, you picked Affliction, you get this stuff now if you're max level. And that's how I think it should be, because people, it's not fun to go picking through those talents. It's just like, oh, I need that. It's really good because it makes me do way more damage. I need that. That's not any fun. So if that just gets merged right into your character, then you can look at your talent trees and say, okay, well, here's where the fun is at. And now a lot of people are saying, well, there's only 6 tiers, Oh my god, every 15 levels I get a talent point? Like, how's that any fun? Well, first of all, Blizzard's not concerned about the leveling system. If your issue is that you think it's going to be boring leveling to endgame because you don't get a talent tree or a talent point every 2 levels, then that's your problem. But that's not what is the big concern here. There's much more important factors at play. So let's assume you're max level and that you can get over the fact that you're not going to get a talent point every 2 levels, because really it doesn't matter, and really it only takes like a week and a half to level from 1 to 85 anyway, if you really want to do it. So that's not an issue. But once you're max level, you have 6 tiers of talent trees to choose from. Now I'm going to continue using Warlock as an example because that's the class that I'm most familiar with. Now, right now, as an Affliction Warlock, I have an instant cast Fear Bomb, Howl of Terror, and I have Death Coil, which is a 3-second terror ability. And looking at the new talent trees, I have them pulled up right here. I'll put them in front of me. Howl of Terror, or sorry, at level 30, when you get your second tree, you can pick between an instant cast Howl of Terror, Mortal Coil, which is the same as Death Coil, or Shadow Fury. So now I have to make a decision, right? So I'm doing threes, and I'm playing with a priest. I know that priest has a Fear Bomb that's going to share a diminishing return with Howl of Terror. So maybe I don't want to take that, right? Maybe I want to take Death Coil, or Mortal Coil in this case. That's so hard to say, I don't know why they would call it that. But, you know, let's say I take Mortal Coil because I don't want to stack my diminishing return with my priest Fear Bomb, because Howl of Terror would just be 4 seconds as opposed to 8 seconds. Now I have my Death Coil, but I don't have my Fear Bomb like I do now. So right now as a Warlock, I have my Fear Bomb and my Pet Silence and all these different CCs and all these different cooldowns, whereas now it's limiting me, right? Now I have to say, okay, well, I'm playing with a priest, so I'm going to pick Death Coil, so that way when we go for a kill, I have Death Coil as a cooldown for CC, and that's going to be great. Or you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to be doing RBGs. Well, I'm not playing Destruction, I'm playing Affliction, but I want Shadow Fury because I want to be able to stun the Flag Carrier and his group of 6 defense, and Shadow Fury is a great way to do that. I say, oh, all of you are running, all of you are healing him, boom, not anymore, you've been Shadow Fury, but I'm an Affliction Warlock, which is something that we're not used to seeing. Now, again, let's say we're going back to 3s or 2s or 5s or whatever, arena, and you're not playing with a priest, right? Or you're not playing with another Warlock, not that you would be in the first place. Maybe I want my Fear Bomb now, right? Because I plan on probably going against a Priest Mage Rogue team, and I want to be able to AoE fear that Rogue instantly off of me and maybe catch the Priest and the Mage as well if they're all together. That's great, but now I lose my Death Coil, right? So now I only have my Pet Silence and my AoE fear. Now, these effects are going to change for every single class, which is what I think people have to realize. And a lot of people are saying, oh my god, well, a lot of these abilities are extremely overpowered. How could this ever work? You know, everybody's going to be overpowered. But that's exactly the point. Blizzard at BlizzCon specifically said, when you look at these talent trees, you will think that some of these abilities, if not all of them, are completely insane and totally overpowered. And everybody looked at them and they were like, oh my god, it's totally overpowered, you know, this class is going to be able to rape everybody. But you're not looking at the big picture. These effects are changing for every single class. It's not like DKs are suddenly going to get 3 OP abilities and just be wrecking everybody. Everybody's getting overpowered abilities. And the way Blizzard is approaching this, I think, is brilliant. Because instead of nerfing everybody, instead of just taking away cooldowns and making everybody feel like less of a player or less of a character than they were in the previous expansion, what you're doing is you're buffing everybody so much that you're essentially creating this twist on how you affect balance. And so, with everybody having overpowered abilities, but less of them, what you're going to see is exactly what I was talking about, that excitement level in Arena Match. So now I don't have my Fear Bomb and my Death Coil to go through all that, or, you know, even if I was Destruction, then I'd have Shadow Fury, a castable Howl of Terror, and a Death Coil. You know, that amount of CC is out of control for one character, but now, if I have my Death Coil ability chosen, and I go into an Arena Match, it's going to be a lot more important for me to use that Death Coil at the exact perfect time. Because now, I can't just run in and every 30 seconds go Fear Bomb, Fear Bomb, Fear Bomb, like I can now. You know, I can run into an Arena Match now, and kind of use some of my CC, not all of it, but some of it willy-nilly. I can just say, oh, well, I want to stop pressure now, so I'm going to use this. But in the future, you're not going to be able to do that, right? Because you're going to say, okay, there's a specific time when my teammates and I need to line up CC, and there's a specific health percentage and a specific time after an ability's been used that I want to use that Death Coil. You know, right after he trinkets that Cyclone, I'm going to Death Coil, and we're going to try to land the kill on his DPS. And that's how it is now, but you have all these other things kind of convoluting the situation, right? Because you have all this extra added CC that makes for unfun play. When you're going for that kill and somebody just says, oh, there's another keybind that I have that's just going to make everybody stop doing damage, like, that's not fun, because then you get frustrated and you feel like you're being put down by that class or put down by the game, and you don't want to feel that way. You want it to be exciting. But the best part is that, like I said before, it's happening to every class. I think that's the biggest thing that people need to get through their heads that they don't realize, is that this effect is all 10 class wide, or with monks, 11. And it's gonna feel like that for everybody. So yeah, while certain people, or excuse me, while everybody are gonna have OP abilities, it's going to feel balanced, right? Because everybody has those abilities, and you have to specifically choose which abilities you want per situation. Now the other great part about this is when you go into an arena match or into a rated BG, you look and you say Disc Priest. I know exactly what that Disc Priest can do. I know he has Power Infusion. I know he has Power Word Barrier. I know he has this cooldown and this cooldown. I know he has all these Priest only cooldowns, and I know he has all these Disc only cooldowns. And you go into the match and you know about all that, right? So when he uses Inner Focus, you say, okay, well now I just gotta wait that out and then I can interrupt him. So that goes down, and then he says, oh well, I'm gonna Power Infuse my Mage, and somebody's gotta Dispel it, or you know, however that's going to work. But you're totally prepared if you're a skilled player for whatever any class has to throw at you, right? We all know pretty much every ability, every major ability, every important ability that every other class has. And so we're going to know how to effectively counter that, which goes back to the first point of having this continuous play of cooldowns and counter attacks. That's all it is. It's counter, 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 counter. And that's not fun, right? Because starts to feel like the same game. Like, oh, this is MLS. Well, we fought MLS last night, and this is what they did, so this is what we expect them to do again. And I know that the Shaman has this cooldown, and I know that the Mage has this cooldown, and I know that the Warlock has this cooldown. But it's not going to be like that anymore, right? Because you're going to run in there, and you're not going to know if that Mage has double polymorph, or if he has sickness polymorph, or whatever, you know. Did he choose Ring of Frost, or did he not? So you're going to be in that fight, and all of a sudden this Ring of Frost is going to go down, and you're going to be like, oh shit, he's got Ring of Frost. Well, okay, that means he doesn't have these other two things, so now I can use that knowledge to my advantage. But what this is going to require of good players, of high-skilled players, is the ability to not only know what abilities they do have, but what abilities they don't have. So when you see that Mage drop that Ring of Frost, you can say, okay, well that means he doesn't have this and this. So maybe even then, once we start seeing how people work through stuff, you're going to say, well that means he probably has this, this, and this. But it's going to be the same way in StarCraft. You know, they brought this up in Legendary this week on Gamebreaker TV. In StarCraft, people were using 4-gate for Protoss. They said 4-gate's good, right? And 4-gate, and that's what everybody was doing. But now people are prepared for 4-gate, so that changes the game dynamically throughout the time that it exists without even a patch, right? The game doesn't have to change for players to change the way that it's played. So if you get used to seeing Frost Mages have this specific set of talents constantly, even though it's really powerful, eventually people are just going to be prepared for it, and the Mages are going to start to change their strategy. And that goes for any class. It's going to work the same way for every class. And that's what's brilliant about it, is that what it's going to do is essentially make the game feel like it does in StarCraft, where you can have essentially overpowered sets of talents, right? But people are going to get used to that, adapt, learn to counter those things, but it can change. Right now, there's no change, right? You go into a fight and you know that that Mage has this, 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 and this. And he's always going to have this, 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 and this. There's no doubt. There's no question, because he doesn't have a choice. He's just going to have everything. So instead of having everything, you have to, you know, choose which certain abilities you're going to be using, and then your enemy needs to also know what you're missing, what you don't have in turn from the fact that you have that ability. That's what's so exciting to me about this whole system, is that you're going to create this dynamic, player-driven series of counterattacks rather than the ones that exist now permanently. And I feel that that's great. And I don't know if I've done a good enough job of explaining myself, but I feel like maybe I have. It seems plain as day to me, and I think that a lot of people that try to argue that it's going to ruin the game, or that it's not going to be as good as I think it is because they haven't looked at it that much. They've only looked at mages. I'm going to go look at the mage talent trees, and I declare that mages are going to be overpowered in Miss Pandaria because I looked at their abilities and they look overpowered. That's not a way to do it. You need to look at all 10 classes, right? I've looked at all 10 classes, all their talents, every single one, compared them to our talent trees now. I know this system inside and out, and of course it's going to change. It's going to change a ton, you know? But that's okay, because there's still plenty of time for the game to come out anyway, and when I get access to the beta, I'm going to be going through and relearning everything that I've learned so far. But the dynamicism, I think that's what's so important, is how dynamic this game is going to feel at that point. Because now, instead of having, let's say, for example, 20 major cooldowns on a threes team, right? Like, let's say RLS, Roguelock Shaman. This is totally incorrect, but for an example, let's say you have 20 major cooldowns that can change the game effectively, right? Now we're going to be minimizing that to about 7, maybe 6 or 7 major cooldowns now instead of 20 or 30. Or maybe, you know, we're going to have 10 instead of 30. But you're reducing that effect, but those cooldowns now are way more important, way more powerful, and way more dynamic. And also, your enemy is not going to be prepared for you to have any of them, because I can now go in there as a Destruction Warlock with all the things that people are used to seeing Affliction Warlocks have, and it's going to totally throw them off. And then when people get used to that crazy spec, I'm just going to switch it. I'm just going to start playing an Affliction with Shadow Fury, you know, and that dynamicism is so important, and I think that that's what people really need to understand, is how much it's going to allow for freedom of choice, freedom of play, exciting games, the wow factor, you know, the idea of not knowing. Because when you get into that arena match right now, you see a specific comp and you know exactly what they're going to do. You know exactly how it's going to play, you know exactly what they're going to throw at you, you know exactly the abilities that you need to use to counter that, the strategy that you need to use to counter that. And it makes for very bland, continuous, repetitive play, and people are over it. People are tired of it. It's not fun anymore. I mean, that's not to say that you can't have fun doing arena or PvP right now, but the idea of it, the ideals behind it, the foundation of it all is bland and repetitive, and it's been bland and repetitive for 7 years. And the only thing that's changed is that we've gotten more abilities, and that the talent trees have changed a little bit every expansion. But that's not what's happening here, right? We're getting a revamp. We're getting a new system that no longer works on the foundation of specific abilities and talent trees, but rather dynamic ones that can change freely and openly. And the best part is they're going to let us respec anywhere. We don't have to go see our guy, right? So you get out of an arena match, and let's say, you know, it's 3 in the morning, and you think you're going to end up going up against that same team. Well, boom, let's change our spec real quick. Bah, 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 bah. Now you go in there, and you go up against the same team. I know this isn't a common scenario. People don't often see the same team, but it does happen. And, you know, it would just be a kind of a funny thing. You go in there, and it's like playing a totally different match, right? Because they have all different abilities, and you have all different abilities, and it's still fun. You don't feel like, oh, well, we beat this team or we lost to this team, so we're going to beat them or lose to them again. That is what I think is so important to understand here, is that the game is going to be completely dynamic. And I know that I've continued to repeat myself now, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to let you guys go, but please, if you have any questions for me, any questions at all, any flaw that you see in my theory, please leave it in the comment section down below. If you like this video, if you learned anything, if you found the show interesting, please subscribe and click that like button if you like this video, because this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. I've written forum post after forum post on MMO Champion about it, and people just don't seem to agree. They don't seem to want to open their minds to this change, and they just think that it's going to be miserable. So tell me what you guys think. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next Sunday for episode 4 of the NGIF show.